I do, though, like the rock music. I got to say, Dustin, I like the rock music, but it might be time. It might be time because I feel like Because Cannabis, hey, everybody. Thank you for joining Because Cannabis here on Wayward Media. Super excited to have you back on. We've had a lot of guests on here for a while, and so we're very excited to do another kind of live show where Dustin and I can just chat, talk about the news, talk about the views, talk about the numbers that are coming out in our industry. But Dustin, we are growing, getting a little more popular. More and more people are clicking subscribe, which you should do if you're listening to the show, whether you're watching us live on YouTube on Fridays, brand new shows every Friday on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, Wayward Media, or we're an audio podcast available anywhere you want to get audio podcasts. New shows on Monday, about 2 weeks behind the live show. So if you want to get the new hotness, the freshness, that's Fridays. That's YouTube. Subscribe. Make sure you know when we're going live. Or follow us wherever you listen to audio podcast, iTunes, etc. Check us out. Dustin, I feel we're growing. We might need to switch it up a little bit. I feel like I've been listening to some new theme songs. What do you think? We need a little different vibe, though I like the rock music. I got to say, I don't mind it.
I think the rock music was perfect when it was perfect for the time that we had it. It got us, it had this kick in the ass type of feel to it that anytime I heard it on the show, it was like, okay, it's time to go to work. And I like that. But right now, I think as we're progressing, as the conversations are changing and the interviews are changing, and even just our perspection on what just on the industry as we get educated, I think it's time to evolve a little bit. I'm interested, I'm ready to play.
I think it's interesting. Now you mentioned that, we're going to talk some headlines that are going on in the cannabis industry today. So a lot of the 2021 sales figures have come out. So we got a lot of new data, a lot of new information. We're data people. We love to look at numbers, see how the industry is trending. But before we get there, Dustin, that's a good point you bring. Like the evolution, right? The evolution not only of like the industry, which we can talk about all the time, but the evolution of the customer. Whether it's a medicinal customer, or whether it's the adult use patient or the adult use vice like Get Soup's Hybro, just that evolution, the education of it. Over the last, say, 5-6 years, we've talked about teaching at the Cleveland School of Cannabis and working there, and the type of people that were interested in the cannabis industry when we first opened were very much what you would say was your stoner stereotype, right? Just long hair, smelling like weed all day long, right? Now it's seniors. It's retirees looking for jobs. It's a very diverse group, if I'm being honest, and that's one of the most exciting parts. We are very diverse, heavy female, heavy minority. I mean, that is both shocking and exciting sometimes, but their knowledge is impressive. And when you think about what cannabis consumers look for, right? Think about Dustin Kava. Think about just trying to buy cannabis, trying to buy weed, back in the day, right? Just getting a baggie, just being happy with it. Maybe it was the magical kind, right? Or maybe it was from Cali. You're like, oh, if it's got these adjectives in front of it, it must be good, And nowadays, people are like, well, what's the terpene profile of that, sir? Can you tell me the exact CBD, TT? I'm like, it's both awesome and, I mean, do you like that? Have you grown? Are you more involved in like that, or you still just give me what you got?
Gosh, I mean, I'm thinking back to when the first bags, and the first bags for me were no license, so you were riding your bicycle, or in my case, we had the dirt bike, and it was ride the dirt bike 15 miles to get it, and then somehow ride it 15 miles back on the road. Again, you're young, you're
That's
bicycling dedication to the cause, and at the same point, that sack was holy to me. It was 2.5 weeks of this is the next 2.5 weeks. Like, it was the event, it was the dessert, it was the dinner, it was everything. It was the whole date. So, and then I think about it now, and yeah, the more that the education has been easier to come across. There's more avenues. There's more and more really well-respected people talking about this. We've had so many doctors on the show alone that have just been like,
I was like, as
it's
evident by
amazing
the degrees of the people that have been on this show recently.
And truly, you know, when I think back even 7-10 years ago, you were not finding that on the East Coast. You were not driving an hour and talking to a physician that really answered every question in a way where you felt like there was validity behind it in some capacity. And yes, it has brought clarity to me. It has actually caused my usage to come down. It has allowed me the ability to cater the medicine to exactly the need in the moment. And to me, you know, as much as I hate the snobbiness that it invokes in me now, I think that the education has actually saved me money. It saved me ease. It saved me time. It saved me. It's actually been an overwhelming positive.
It's interesting you say that because it does feel a little snobby sometimes. It does feel a little like
it is, of course,
right?
it is.
Like the wine world, right? So we have what is they call? What's the wine specialist guy? The sommelier,
sommeliers, or something.
I don't think that's right either. Neither one of us are right. There is now like a ganjier thing, right? There's a degree program. I just met one, Zachary Zimko, one of our educators at Cleveland School of Cannabis, just became the first certified ganjier to live in Ohio or whatever something. So he just got this first thing, went out, took this whole test by smell and things like that. Like to get your wine, gosh, I wish we could know that word, sommelier. I feel like it's sommelier. I feel like that's it.
I went to Google to hear it, and it is
sommelier. Sommelier. To do that, you have to like taste wines and know exactly the flavor profiles and maybe the vineyard. And the cannabis profile is similar to that, to be the congier or whatever it is. But it feels almost a little snobbish in a weird way. Like it feels a little bit because part of this whole thing has always been about counterculture and not into these type of all these specifics and things. But yet here we are as we're evolving, getting more into that. Like we're about to talk sales figures and data and all this information, about cultivars that are, and there are people probably, even old timers, who look at this and say, I wish it wasn't that, right? Do you ever sometimes wish it wasn't that? Do you wish it was the band that didn't get big, that didn't put out their debut record, and it was just something that you and your close friends could have? And I know you're into the medicinal aspect of it, so that feels like that always where it goes. But on a personal level, do you love widespread acceptance?
I'm a nostalgia guy. I am the generation that built nostalgia. And so for me, of course, my entire generation is off this idea that the old is the way. The classic cartoons, the bands at the time, the cars, literally you go down the list and it is just like this love affair with what you grew up with. And so yes, there's a part of me that says it is the band I wish never got big. And even some of the bands I loved back then, I still wish that they never got big, Like it has happened with even my nostalgia for the ones that are even around today. So I think in anything that someone, and anything that I've ever seen, you have the extremes with people. And so when I was a kid, you had that kid who just had all the knowledge on trains on the playground, and he would just tell you like, this train is this thing and carries this load, and, right. And so in a certain degree, I think it's just that people, when they fall in love with something, when something becomes a passion, you have degrees of passion. And in this case, they are taking these exponential degrees of passion, applying it to the industry, and finding a way to make a job out of it, And I think, like, in some degree, what else are you going to do when you have a love affair of trains? You're either going to go be a conductor or, like a mechanic in the yard, or, like, you're going to find something that facilitates that love. And I also think this concept of, say it again to me. What is it? It's
Ganjier. Sommelier.
Yeah, Ganjier.
Yeah.
Okay. So with this concept, with that is that's not just a normal job. That person has a taste palette that is far and exceeds the normal person's taste palette. When they smoke, or the way that they can process how it feels throughout the body, and can literally say it started in the hands, it moved its way inward, finally the body relaxed. When they can actually be conscious of all that, or they can say, I taste roots, a taste of nut in this in some capacity, and have it be actually right. I think a lot of that, you have a propensity to have that palate in the first place. And if you are if it's a small percentage. So in that case, I'm like, you go, dude. Like, if you can taste the, whatever.
Like the water source that it came from, like that grew in the Regionus Mountain of Colorado. I can tell the, Kanuki River taste bed because of the soil. I mean, but I feel like when you get into the wine, like they can tell you the regions that this grape was grown in. And I do believe as you evolve, palate is a great word for it, as you evolve as the cannabis consumer, and I think we all know that on some level. Like I can tell when I have good stuff versus bad stuff, to put it very simplistically, high end versus low end. And so once again, there are people, you're right, who have an even more extreme version of that, who can tell flavor profiles to the, soil content, to the water region, which is, it's still snobby, but it's still pretty awesome. It is pretty cool.
Well, what the industry has actually been missing seems more like the cigar industry than what the wine or beer alcohol industry is missing. In the cigar industry, their classifications are on smoke, like the actual taste in the mouth. They classify it on how it smells to others. They classify it on, like they have multiple classifications, but it's not just a personal classification. It is how this affects others around you while you're smoking it, classifications that are in there. And cannabis does not have that. It does not have the smell to others, smell to yourself while you're smoking it, taste as you roll it in your mouth, taste on the exhale, taste on the, it doesn't have these. It's not including the household, I guess, in it in some capacity. And I think when you add that consciousness to your classifications, to the Ganjier, classifications where it isn't just taste the nut and the root, taste the water source from this Michigan stream, but also the neighbor across the yard is going to smell a hint of blueberry as the skunk wafts by, and it's like, there's this other effect to that I think we could also benefit from.
That is really, I think about the growth of the industry. We look at stats and figures all the time, and everyone wants to compare cannabis to the alcohol marketplace. They always want to talk about how it compares to alcohol. They always want to talk about what it is and its differences between it. But I think, and I cannot believe I've never even considered this, I think you have painted a better representation of what the market will be. Cigars. It's a much better representation because not everyone's going to do it. I think we lump it in with alcohol because of the effect upon consumption, right? Cigars, although if you have some cigars, man, you can get a little lightheaded. I've had some that are a little extreme, right? And so we consider it because you take it and you have that effect. And obviously there's the medicinal side of it. But I think the specialtiness of it, and when you go to a cigar shop and they have the regions that it was grown in, and as you said, the effect and the taste and that is a wonderful idea to think about. And I can almost picture a cigar shop as kind of the model moving forward if we really look at what a upscale kind of cannabis shop would be. Like to have that smell, to walk into the room, to be able to have a bunch of, pre-rolls and stuff by you, and don't sniff them with your nose, people. By the way, the signs are legit. It is, I know everyone wants to take that cigar and wants to like go underneath their nose because they've seen it in a movie or they watched Scarface do it or something like that. But what you're doing is rubbing your COVID-filled snot all over the cigar. So every time someone comes up, they're also going to get it, and you're kind of imprinting your own oils onto that. Like, don't touch it unless you're going to buy it, people, if you're a cigar shopper. I feel like cannabis might be leaning that way. Like, not exactly, but I like what you talk about as far as the effect in, the effect out, the effect on the surroundings, right? And I think that's a really exciting concept. I like that a lot. You talked about jobs, Dustin. Let's talk. We have one of our first charts here. So, cannabis is growing. There are a lot of people working cannabis, and we should say, by the way, a lot of our charts are collected from stats we're going to talk about today. So, the most reputable sources out there that crunch cannabis numbers, places like New Frontier Data, MJ Biz Daily, Cannabis Business Times, etc. But it's weird, Dustin. All the stats and figures in our industry always have to be taken with an asterisk because we're not exactly sure. It's a cash-only business. There are a lot of people who keep it off the radar. There are, you get screwed by the IRS working in the plant-touching aspect, so you may not want to report all your things. So it's a little tricky sometimes to bring that up, but we just had the most recent job report of how many people are working in the legalized cannabis industry. And so we'll bring it up on screen here. This article is from the New York Post, but this chart here was available from a lot of different places. So you can see here, right now, about 430,000 people, give or take, 430,000 people working legally in the cannabis industry. Based off, you can see the growth in the last 5 years, right? 400%. We've gone from 100,000 to almost 430,000. Obviously, we'll talk about later some states that have gone legal in this past year. States like New York will exponentially add more jobs, even Connecticut. Those places will add jobs as they go legal. So is that a good number? Does that surprise you? Are you shocked, dismayed? What do you think when you see like 500,000 people almost on average are working legally in roughly, just so you know, it's not on this chart, but approximately 40%, give or take, of those jobs typically work in the three main plant touching silos, right? Cultivation, processing, dispensary. So that's some other stat from some other places. Like 45% are in that aspect, meaning the other 55%, something that's passionate to both you and I, Dustin, are in the ancillary, entrepreneurial, making your way, creating a thing, avoiding the legal headaches, avoiding the large capital, but still working in the business. And so we'll say, we don't know what the number is here, but we'll say 60-40 split as far as those 430,000 jobs.
I'm not necessarily surprised at the number. If there was any surprise, it was going to be the fact that I thought it would be more. And I only say that because when I think of it, you always hear every state that comes in, every county, every company always talks about, we're going to add hundreds of jobs. We're going to add, this industry in Cleveland is going to add thousands and thousands of jobs. And to me, the marketplace is always assumed to be much bigger. I just looked up the population for the United States, and it was 329 million right now. And so if the jobs are at 442 million or 442,000, what is that number? Bring that back up.
I had to find the better article. I had just the image. That's what I was trying to find. So 430,000.
So 430,000, and again, there's 329 million people in the world. That is, it seems like when I look at those numbers, I'm like, holy smokes. It's actually, when you factor in every other industry and every other job, and the fact that a lot of population doesn't work and a lot of population are kids and they're still going to school, and then, our senior citizen population, I'm like, holy smokes. This almost seems like a 3% of all jobs out there is in the cannabis industry right now, 5%. And I mean, there's a heck of a lot of industry. I think about like the manufacturing and the oil and gas and the service industries and the crypto new technology industries and the backbone of our infrastructure industries and the construction. I'm like, 5% being in cannabis is nuts.
And you consider a lot of states, obviously you mentioned, people not working. We're having obviously employment issues. Even in the cannabis industry, they're trying to get entry-level people, right? Those bud tenders or patient navigation specialists, trimmers, packagers, all those jobs that pay 13, 14, 15, 16 an hour, depending where you live. And it's interesting because one of those numbers, and part of this article from the NY Post, the New York Post, was talking about how New York, which is still getting going, but obviously has potential to be a enormous income, enormous revenue state in our industry, only has about 3,000 workers currently. And the guy estimates in the article, they probably could need easily 10,000 more. Like in the next year, as they continue to grow, that number will grow exponentially. So I think, and you can tell by the growth each year, I mean, it is adding on, especially between 1 year ago All right, we've talked a lot already. We talked on our 420 show. Check that out, 4 hours and 20 minutes on Dustin and I, a lot of guests talking about cannabis, celebrating April 20th on Because Cannabis on Wayward Media. So check that show out if you have not. We talked some figures in there, but COVID was kind, kind to the cannabis industry. Obviously, terrible times, and hope you and your families went through it okay. But COVID was tough for a lot of people in that 1920 year. Not so for cannabis. Look at how many jobs have been added in just 2 years. And I think that's the most interesting factor. Almost 200,000 jobs in 24 months. Like, most people are trying to find employees, and we are pushing. That's a lot.
Yeah, I really didn't even factor in that change from 19 to 2020. Do you think with any industry that's labeled as a rush, imagine, this is the green rush, it had the word rush behind it. What other industries can you think of in the past that had the word rush attached to it that actually ended up being good for whatever area that the rush happened to?
Hold on. This is like one of those questions, like, all the athletes that were supposed to be the next Michael Jordan, there's only like 2, and there's like 85 of them that compared. There are, I don't know, this does not relate to that, but I was just reading an article today about NFT sales being down like 95% in the last 6 months, right? So a lot of things are fads, like 3D. I was just reading about the death of 3D television as well, something that a few years ago was mandatory and now is down. So these industries that have these splurges, I'm trying to think of like jobs that are created in industries and that have this enormous growth really quick and then keep growing and then sustain.
And to
I can't think. I'm trying to go through my head. Like I'm running through it. Maybe I don't know. I don't know.
Even when you heard, gosh, I think of, I don't think they were, what were they calling the internet rush? I was too young. I mean, I was using, when no one had the internet 5 years before, we were on the 14.4 modem that it cost $600 to plug into the laptop for, my mom's work. And we, she was on the forefront of technology 25 years ago. I mean, like, she was looking at the first 3D TVs 25 years ago. She was, and I don't remember the internet ever being considered the internet rush. All you ever heard was the internet, the .com bubble when it busted, but I don't think people were calling it the .com rush. Like, the semantics matter to me. And to me, this poise, it's a poise for larger corporations to take over. And that's how, to me, what rush has always seemed. It's like the ones who made out in San Francisco during the rushes were the big boys selling the shovels and owning the hotels and, selling the wagon wheels, and the corporations that monopolized the things that those guys needed during the rush. So I don't know, man. I'm scared. I'm scared for these guys making $13 an hour, because to me, the value that they provide, it does take time to cultivate. It takes time. You're dealing with people in pain. You're dealing with a lot of different types of people, and a bud tender per se, there's a lot of nuance to that job that shouldn't just be labeled as in, out the door. You're only talking to this person for 30 seconds. You don't even need to know very much. Can you work the register and type a couple buttons? If so, you made it in here, a clean record. You're in here for 14 an hour. And to me, a growing industry that's sustainable past a rush are the ones that give workable, livable wages that allow the people within the industry to have families and to grow and to stay,
What a wonderful segue that you actually had no clue was coming. So well done. So I thought of another industry, actually, because there was another kind of chart that's really making the news this week, another headline from MJ Biz Daily that came out that a lot of people picked up on, that could be considered another industry that had a rush of like stores, right, and employed a lot of people. And now that industry, in this chain in particular, is dealing with labor issues, dealing with employee issues. I think in the early days, as we bring up the chart on screen here, in the early days of Starbucks, right, the barista was a treasured position who took your coffee and made you there was the whole difference between going to a gas station. The original Starbucks and coffee house design was going there for a coffee experience, right? In the latte, and it was made with this love and care. And, in these coffee houses, they had fireplaces and you sat down, they were communal by nature. And now Starbucks, the whole new square footage plan is to minimize, right? Less seating, more drive-throughs, multiple drive-through lanes, mobile apps, pickups, these types of things. It's in, it's out, coffee, 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 coffee. And so I think it's interesting that there's another industry that is similar, but you're right. Those jobs, should be more important, but aren't. But this news, Dustin, took the screen. The big takeaway, the big headline is that cannabis, legal cannabis, medicinal, easy for me to say, medicinal and recreational, last year in 2021 outsold dollar-wise, right? This is a misleading title because the amount of cannabis you get for dollar-wise for the amount of coffee, right? Coffee's $4 or $5 a pop. Dollar-wise, billion-wise, outsold it. The chart says about $24 billion. That was our legal sales in 2021. We'll talk about that after this. So we did $24 billion in legal sales last year. And Starbucks did about $20 billion in legal sales of their legal coffee last year. And then there's some other charts on screen here. Cigarettes, by the way, $52 billion. We're halfway there to the cigarette industry. Cigarettes have been in the last 4 or 5 years declining, and obviously cannabis has been on a rise through there. Over-the-counter medicines, look at that. Even just standard over-the-counter medicines, and then you have over-the-counter painkillers and then sleep aids as well. So you factor all those in. I don't know why they put salty snacks on there. That just seems, that one category doesn't seem to fit with the rest of them into there. So the big takeaway, the big buzzworthy headline, Dustin, and let me ask how this catches your eye. Then we'll talk about some other things, I think, compared to medicines. More cannabis than Starbucks coffee. Does that excite you? Do you not care? What does that stat in that headline do for you?
There's a part of me that says it better have. I mean, we're talking so many different corporations and so many different minds and brilliant people all across the country working in the cannabis industry. And if they can't outperform as a whole to Starbucks, I'm like, what the hell are we doing? The biggest takeaway to me in this is there's only maybe 1 or 2 sections of this chart that I predict will increase outside of the cannabis. And it's funny because what's going to happen is everything else is decreasing. Everything else is either decreasing because of the cannabis use or has a decreasing effect once cannabis is added to it. That when I think about this, I'm like, the only thing that's safe on this list that cannabis isn't going to start coming after and taking market share from, actual dollars spent from, not just I'm going to buy my coffee today and my cannabis. Eventually, I do see I'm going to not buy my sleep aid and I'm going to buy my cannabis instead. And so sure, I do see market share being taken away from everything but salty snacks.
Well, that's only going to increase.
And so it's
Let's
this idea. Right. And so, cigarettes have not been on an increase at all. No matter, even with the vape industry and whatnot, it is not on an increase in sales overall per capita and usage per capita that says it's sticking around. And a lot of our budgetary things, locally, and are tied around this cigarette tax and this sin tax that is off of an industry that is not increasing. And so to me, I think, the prediction I get, my heart says that we will be in the $36 billion range by 2025. We will be in the $50 billion range, on par with how cigarettes are close to 2029, 2030. And when you look at that numbers and you say within less than 8 years, we're going to double in sales nationally.
Absolutely.
I truly, in all of my heart, believe that is the case. And yeah, and I believe when you look at this chart, when you think about market share that's decreased in dollar amounts from these guys, there's easily $25 billion to be making up nationally for this industry.
I think so. If you're checking us out on audio, if you have followed us, we appreciate that. We're looking at the MJ Biz Daily chart that talks about U.S. cannabis sales versus other industries. And you are correct. Right now, we're predicted by 2030 to be $50 billion. You know why? Right, here's the thing.
Really? That's the prediction right now?
No, yeah, you're exactly right. Well, it's because here's the deal.
Pretty damn
There's
close
never
to
going to be, Starbucks is already out there. Like, there's no more room to grow. We have 18 adult use states. So we got 32 more states that can get legal adult use cannabis, which is a crazy revenue generator. We still have 14 more states that can get medicinal cannabis. We have a ton of states that can still get low CBD. Even, I just saw Kansas, one of the 3 last bastions of anti-weed rhetoric, Idaho, Nebraska, and Kansas. Kansas, I think I even have an article on here somewhere, is pushing for medicinal. So, of course, cannabis will almost double because more states will legalize. And that's instant sales, right? Like that's something. Starbucks is not a new thing where you can't buy Starbucks in Pennsylvania. You can go to Pennsylvania and buy Starbucks, but you can't buy cannabis in Pennsylvania or Ohio or Florida or right now Maryland. But guess what you can do next month in Maryland? Buy cannabis. Or how about Virginia? Buy legal cannabis. They should be up and running, I think maybe even now, like early May, late June. So yes, it's just going to create dollars because it's currently forbidden in any other industries. All of these other ones exist. Right? There's no new territories or states for any of these other industries to conquer. So, of course, cannabis will rise. It makes perfect sense. But you're right on track. We are expected to double sales. I don't have a chart on this, but let me tell you some things here. So, $24 billion is what cannabis did in 2021. Up $21 billion is what we did in 2020. So, a $3 billion increase. Now, our big increase was in 2019. Right? 2019 to 2020, we went from that 13 to that 21. But let me tell you this, and let me bring up this chart. Maybe that'll give some little reference there. We are seeing right now, Dustin, right? We got the good and the bad. We are seeing right now the potential, right? Even though cannabis will grow, right? See, it's never going to stop, right? Cannabis is never going to stop. I mean, look at a state like, here, let me bring this headline up for you. A state like Ohio, where we're at, $381 million in medical cannabis, with only 0.8% of the population being a patient and only 0.6% of them actually have purchased. So it's a teeny tiny number of people. We only have, like I said, 8%, less than 1% of our population registered, and almost half of that actually buys. So it's a small amount of people. It's less than 100,000 people that are buying cannabis on a regular basis in Ohio. We did $380 million last year, which is pretty good overall. But you have a state like New Mexico. They just went adult use, $22 million the first month, $17 million in their medicinal. So these states getting up there. Do you like that number? Is it Ohioan? You see that? 381? It's low. I mean, compared to a lot of states and their programs, it's pretty low.
It's insanely high when you think of per capita usage, the restrictions on how you use, the lack of openness and availability in terms of locations of provision centers. When you look at the monumental amount of restrictions and heartache that patients have to go through to get their medicine in this state, that number is insane to me. And then when I hear these cultivators in the state complain about any damn thing that has to do with money, I'm like, you know what? I would rather be you in this state with all these restrictions and have the lack of competition and the ability to charge as much as they're charging. Ohio's the most expensive I've ever paid anywhere in any state. Even for per gram, it is by far, even in high tourist areas and in luxury things, Ohio has been the most expensive. And so it's amazing. It's actually really surprising. I expected it to be more 200.
Well, take a look at that chart. Well, if you, once again, you can't see this, you're listening to audio. Look at what we highlighted on screen here. Up 72%. 72% from last year. You can see the chart right here. So we did 56 million roughly. If you look right here, 56 million roughly in our first year. We did about $277 million in Ohio last year, and then about that 381 this year. So almost $691 million since we started. But big jump. 19 was obviously very slow. We only had 5 dispensaries for the first 5 months of the program. So those numbers are really, that's why 19 is so low, even though it opened in January.
Yeah. And between 2019 and 2022, I personally know of 20 that have opened out of the 55 or 60 that are even out there in Ohio.
And there's 70 more coming. We have 70 more dispensaries in Ohio coming.
So, I think access is a big thing. I think, when I first started with it, there was no deals. There was this weird thing where they were not allowed to give discounts and stuff. And then the state had to come through and provide these really weird laws that were like, you can't have discounts on everything across the board. You have to pick specific things or a specific brand, or Like it was really, really nuanced. And now it seems, things are more lenient. And they're getting quicker to classify new methods of product. So what cultivators and processors used to do and have to go to the state and say, this is the device we want to use. Is this approved? And the state would come in and say, no. And then these guys would be like, well, here's the science behind why it should be approved. It vaporizes it. It never reaches above this temperature. This is the intake amount. It can be regulated. It has all these benefits. And the state would be like, no, we're going to have to look into that. And then it takes a year for the state to do their research, or the first cultivator that said, can we use this device and was turned down 8 months ago, some other cultivator messages the state and says, can we use this type of device? It has this, this, and this, and is completely legal. And here's the science behind it. And they're like, yes. And there's no rhyme or reason to why it is now, or why that first company is never called to let them know it's now verified. Because again, they had the idea. They were first to market on that concept, but were turned down by a state who doesn't have enough research. And so, again, Ohio puts a lot of limitations, but they're changing. And I've seen a lot of changes that have benefited. And I guess in terms of dollar amounts, I hope that they're seeing change equals more money. Listen to patients' needs and cultivator and processing needs equals more money. Like these guys are not trying to give you less money. They want more money for themselves, which means more money for you.
Yeah, 72% increase last year. Now, part of that, once again, being COVID, being that, but now we just talked 70 more stores. We're going to double. We're going to more than double. We only have 57 current stores open. I think maybe 57, 58. So we're going to add 70 in the next 18 months. So we're going to add 110, 120% more options available to you. So all those cultivators that feel bad about that, once again, we don't really weep for them because their money is coming in, the dispensaries. No, we've talked about Oklahoma before. We may have a guest coming up from Oklahoma here soon, by the way. We talked about Oklahoma before, and kind of not having any regulations and what happens when a state goes the opposite way, right? But we're seeing in some legal areas, and I thought this was interesting, right? We have the good. We have these $24 billion. And what I was about to say earlier is the first quarter of 2022 statistically is one of the lowest first quarters for cannabis in the last 5 years. We haven't seen this low in numbers since, like 2016, 2017. April 20th, one of a big sales day, was up some places, but you have certain states like Oregon, right, a state that has a tremendous amount of cannabis availability, that are starting to see dips, right? This has been an industry. We talked about the rush. We talked about the almost foolproofness of it that has thus far, this is something I am passionate to me. We talk about in my commercial cultivation operations class, like efficiency and bottom line management and people management. It so far has been a green rush. If you grow it, they'll buy it and they'll buy shitloads, right? That's how it's been thus far. Now, management of people, right? And so 2022, also, once again, for Oregon, the low, but Oregon, the start up, down 14%, almost 15%. Last year, they have, look at this, 18 dispensaries per 100,000 residents. 18 dispensaries. We have 120,000 or 130-some thousand people in our program, and we only have like 60 total dispensaries. They have 18 per 100 with 771 adult use dispensaries. And then so there's another article, I won't bring it up, but there's another article about Ontario. Same concept. Ontario, just the city alone, having 1,900 some stores that want to open up. Ontario itself has 1,900 cannabis licenses just in Ontario. So we're almost getting too much, right? And this has been one of those fears. Growth is good, but exponential growth means not smart, thought out business. We're starting to see now articles like this. 2022 could be the first year that cannabis kind of plateaus, unless states go legal.
Okay, do me a favor. Can we bring back up the sales charts for the years? Because, if this is the 2 years that we're going to talk about for the next 15 years because of how explosive the growth is, it's like the anomaly in all of the 20-year statistics behind cannabis sales. When a government hands you thousands of dollars in checks, you blow it on weed. Like, if it wasn't going to be the biggest year ever for cannabis sales, it's like it should have been, But my question to you is, if I'm really going to be curious at the 2018 numbers and the 2022 numbers, meaning I want to forget about 19, forget about 20, and almost forget about 21. And I want to, almost say, if those two anomalies in growth, if the government wasn't handing out checks to help the bottom line of all of these fucking corporations that are growing, and making it the only store that is open compared to the 65% of the others that are shut down, and the whole nuance around the industry at that time. I think that the growth between 18 and 19 and the growth at 22 is actually going to be very, very close. It's going to look almost like a normal business making normal growth. I think and the spike is going to actually be over a 20-year period. Those 2 years, everything else will seem to, normalize. And yeah, I hope sales go down in that capacity. We have 10% inflation, right now. And so they're not only getting hit with 14% less in sales, 10% higher inflation, and the fact that they built their industry on $13 and $15 an hour jobs. These people want more. So I think, they're in for a wild ride this year.
Yeah, I was trying to find, I had another chart. I couldn't find it exactly. This is not the one I wanted. This one talks about disruption of market shares over the last few years in some of the major playing states.
These are my kind of charts.
Yeah, you can take a look at, if you're looking at the screen here, if you're watching us live on YouTube, we have our greenish color is medicinal and kind of our dark brown color is recreational, and blue is both. So just taking a look at the sales, but overall, it's been a trend. It went up. I know this chart doesn't really show exactly what I wanted, but you are correct. So what we're seeing, and I think what has to happen, and this is that realistic approach, and I'm going to talk about legalization here before we end the show, the rapid approach to growth is great. The COVID year may have given some people, much like a maker of a Zoom, or like, remember when Zoom launched? And maybe there's something, right? There's another rush. Everyone's like, I got to get my Zoom answer out. There's like 19 video messaging conference services that are no longer needed. Zoom and Teams, like the few big boys still remain. All the rest are gone now because more people are going back to work now, right? And doing those things. Or if you're the person who made super stiff work pants, look, man, we're going casual work day every day, joggers for life. So like these trends are changing. And the cannabis is, I'm afraid, looked at last year in 2021, and even the headline on that article of a chart I just showed you was everyone thought like 2020 was so huge. But you are correct. We have to put almost an asterisk next to 2020, right? It's like the steroid era in baseball. It was the steroid era in cannabis because it was deemed essential. No one had anyone to do, and people got a ton of free money from the government. And they're like, bro, what's open? The weed store? Let's go.
And right? I will not allow some cultivator or a provision center or anybody in this industry to complain 1 ounce about any part of what is happening in 2022. They people knew you give out free money and you print money, you're going to have inflation. They knew it. So if they didn't have enough foresight 2 years ago to understand that their business model is going to have to change in the 2 years while they have all this extra influx in cash, and that they should probably use that money to become more streamlined, more efficient, make sure that their hires are going to be around and have, find ways to make that money when you have 10% inflation, because I knew the inflation was happening 3 years ago. It was guaranteed. You couldn't print that money and have that influx into the market and not have inflation. You just can't do it. And any business official would know that.
It'll be interesting to see as we have this conversation next year. Hopefully you'll be here to join us as well. Next year, because cannabis, when we break down 2022's numbers, Dustin, I think we're going to see that plateau. All right. And I think you're right. Let's take a look at it from when Colorado went legal, because we had slow growth. Right. And it's probably never going to be fair to compare because there's always going to be billions coming in because of a state like New York. And when it's fresh and new, Illinois did $2 billion in the first year, but they're also at a plateau, right? So everyone, when it's fresh, is like, that state rushes, right? Gets it. Any state that goes adult use, New Mexico, just did $20 million in legal cannabis in a month. That's not sustainable. Now you see those numbers and you have to realize it's not sustainable. Something I wanted to show you, Dustin, we talked a little bit before about cigarettes and their sin tax, that moral tax. Excise tax is really what it's called. Sin tax is a very moralistic word, but their excise tax, which is, how corporations make money and stuff, and how that's part of selling those products. And cannabis has an excise tax in every adult use state. That's one of the sales pitches for cannabis, for legal cannabis, is it gives money back to infrastructure. How the Congress people and your state representatives use that money, that might be a different story. But we got some numbers coming in over the last few years of 2021 marijuana tax revenue by state for some of these adult use states. Now, look at this. California, by the way, did $6.1 billion in 2021. So they're bringing in almost $1.3 billion in tax revenue for their state. So you can take a look at some of the states that are up there. Michigan only has about an 18% excise tax rate for that. And you can even take a look at state by state here right below on that chart. Here's the money. This is maybe even more interesting. The money that's coming in over the last several years for legalized cannabis. And so in 2021, obviously, we saw that growth. We almost had $1 million jump in legalized tax revenue from 19 to 20 because of the COVID year. So we did about $3.7 billion in legal tax revenue last year for these states. Is that a sales pitch for you? Is that something that gets you excited? That like, hey, I want Ohio to legalize because they're going to spend this money on my kid's school, or do you not trust the government? Like, this is always the sales pitch, and you can look at these numbers like Colorado got 400,000. California, $1.3 billion in 1 year for tax revenue on a product of a thing that still hasn't reached its potential. That sounds exciting, but I see I see indifference in your face right now.
I think when it comes to dishing out money like this, the ones that would actually probably have a firmer grip on where it should go is more the local communities that are spending the money in the first place there. And when it comes to the revenue like this, it's already in the word. It's the state tax revenue. The state is making the choice. The politicians, at the highest level, make an overline position, dictate what goes down and trickles down to everyone else below them. And then the guys that are below them kind of think about what they would do with it and have certain restrictions or barriers, apply to them. I think when I think of like Ohio, I really like that Fireland Scientific is a B Corp. And I really, in some ways, I'm like, well, it could be just a tax benefit in a lot of degrees, and you can just pay your employees higher wages. You can do a lot of things when you're not paying 40% taxes on your revenue as a business. But I will say, I like that idea that the ones making the money, if done right, if you have the proper transparency in how you do business, I think they have the ability to make the most profound effect. They could easily donate $40,000 to a children's art fund for the local schools and fund it for the next 10 years. And that's just, 1 month of their donation value in that. And so to me, letting the states trickle it down means that the local county is going to get 10 cents for every dollar that actually went in. And if they got it from that actual place that the revenue was being drawn from, they might have gotten 70 cents on the dollar or something to the actual community that it came from.
Yeah, it is interesting. It is something that I agree. I don't think it's as cool of a number. It's important, but it's where's the money really going? Colorado has raised themselves $1 billion in revenue since they've gone adult use. I think they're at 1.3 billion. They've done about 9 billion in sales since they've gone adult use in 2014. So they've raised $1 billion just as a state, which sounds awesome. And you throw that number out and it sounds impressive, but then you listen to cannabis advocates in Colorado who are frustrated, upset about where the money goes and such. So it's interesting as more states grapple with legalization. There's been a few ups and downs. We're running out of time here, but a few ups and downs in the last few months of South Carolina getting rejected again, of Kansas possibly legalizing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this year. We got a few ballot initiatives, which will come up in November, of which Ohio may be one. We'll see if it makes it there. I wanted to end a couple of fun things here for you, Dustin, before we end. I don't really have an article for it, but something is big that is happening in Canada, at least, is the approval of using a DoorDash-like service for delivering your cannabis, right? So moving that next step. There are states that have some legal cannabis deliveries. We just talked about, the ease of cannabis, and obviously there's the medicinal side. Do you like these advents? Well, first let me ask you, Dustin, are you a DoorDasher? Are you someone, I'll be super real with you. I've only gotten food delivered to my house via like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Group, I don't even know what the Grubhub, you pick them like 3 or 4 times in my entire life. Even during the COVID era, I just still was a pickupper. I'm a pickupper. I go places. I cannot tell you, Dustin Kava, the last time I had pizza delivered to my house. I will always save the $3 or $4 and go get the pizza. So I'm not going to spend 10 or 11 more dollars. In fact, most of the times I did use those apps was when they sent me free delivery, because then I still going to tip $5 and at least I'm not paying $12, right? And the prices are more expensive. So all that being said, the convenience of cannabis, right? Getting it delivered, whether it's DoorDash, a drone drops you off, the medicinal aspect aside, right? Because we know that. I know that if a patient has mobility issues, that obviously that's a big thing. But just as general, right? And probably it's not the patients we got to worry about. It's the random, like kids at my daughter's middle school get DoorDashed every day, like, Taco Bell, Chipotle all the time. Do you worry that the ease of access makes it easier for the young people, because it's pretty regulated to buy cannabis now? Delta 8's a different story, but do you like that ease? Do you excited by it? Does it scare you? What do you think?
Yeah, it's what I really think, that when you can take the kids out the black market, there is less access and less want for the other things. And as someone who had to buy on the black market for 25 years or 20 years, I do see that when I would go to those places where I would have that access in the black market, there was usually some other options at that person's house or at that place of some other type of thing that I could get. Whereas in this case, I love the idea that it's a very, very regular, very controlled area where all the things that are exciting you are all part of the same process and have a bit more understanding there. Or it's just, there's something to that. And so I'm not necessarily worried. What I really think that those delivery services for are not to create ease of access for the local patients or local people. The truth is, I think back to what Reverend Callie Addison, from KGL Network, that we've had onto the show, what she was talking about on how Canada wants to be a tourist destination for cannabis. And so when I think of delivery, companies, the times that I have used the DoorDashes or the cannabis deliveries it's the times I'm out of town, out of state, and it's a very new place, or I don't have access to my normal car, or it's something where I'm out with the family and it's like, listen, you're going to meet me at the McDonald's a block away and I'm going to get what I need. And it's going to be, so there's a special type of need there. And I don't think it pertains to the locals, because obviously a local can usually get into their car and drive. But when I think of Canada becoming the tourist destination, why it is step number 1 is allow these people to get it at their hotels, so that these idiots who don't know anything about Canada aren't driving around the roads trying to pick up their cannabis. Like, let's just get it to them. Let's change that ease of access for tourists.
I always love, that's why I love picking your brands. Why I love having the show with you, Dustin, here, because Cannabis on Wayward Media. Hopefully you have subscribed as we enjoy our conversation. By the way, great almost not having a guest today, because I like talking to guests. I like learning from Reverend Kelly, Dr. Williams, Dr. Bid, Alan Katz, the wedding DJ. We got some amazing cultivators and other people coming up here in the next month. There's some really, really cutting edge science concepts coming up as well. But you have this different way of looking at it. I never really thought about that, right? Never thought about the cigar angle, and I kind of really the tourism aspect of it, or the ease of use, right? I'm very self-absolved, apparently, like whatever matters to me. But you're right. When you go somewhere, and if I was to order like delivery or rooms, it is at a hotel. A, you're kind of out of town, and so you don't know where to go. B, you feel like it's a little bit of a vacation or a splurge, or maybe the company's paying for it, and like so you're kind of do those extra things. And so when you're in a new area, right? You don't know where to go. You're only there for a night. You don't have a car. Right, your company's too cheap to rent you one. You fly in, you take an Uber there. You don't want to take an Uber to the weed store to come back. You get cannabis delivered to you. That's a great idea for that. That's exciting. It's always just good conversations with you, Dustin. That's why, because cannabis is a great show. You know, we were talking before the show, and we'll wrap up on this here. Hopefully, thank you for joining us. But you were talking something about seed reclassification, and I'm not as into the plant, though I am into the current news. But the classification, right, of THC is that gray area. And maybe next time we get another news and note show, we'll talk about Delta 8 regulation, Delta 10, which is, I know we talked about it before, but it's really, you know, I had that article lined up, but just didn't get to it. It's really, the FDA and other people are really starting to crack down on it. You may not be able to find Delta 8 soon. But what is this about the hemp seed that you were talking about, or the seed and its reclassification? Oh, snap. All right.
I mean, yeah, the DEA essentially has come out. Okay, if you can imagine the seed market as it stood today, the seed market had to be deemed as the novelty thing. So you are allowed to, in a lot of ways, buy seeds from outside of the country, which is where a lot of the people got their original seeds and shipped them in. And as a novelty, as they're never ever meant to be put into soil and grown.
Is that, hold on a second, just real quick, is that how they do that? I had a friend, you know, no names, who was buying seeds, and he bought them from overseas. Like what you described is what he was describing. And I never really, I guess I never asked, like, how does that legal? So it was classified as kind of like, say you run a smoke shop and those pipes are for tobacco use only, sir, right? So basically they just put their fingers in the ears and were like, yes, it's a novelty. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's like you're gonna frame them, and you're gonna put epoxy over them and use them as coasters or something. Yeah, it was deemed as something like so. Now, okay, you got to imagine you got that industry, but imagine an Ohio cultivator. They just got their license. They're brand new in the state. The state says they're only able to get plant matter or seeds or something from within their own state boundaries. States have certain rules of where the medicine can come from. Where can it have initiated from to begin with and stuff like that. Michigan has had it. Ohio has had it. Virginia's talking about it. And so to be able to get those clones into the state, or those seeds into the state, it was very nuanced. I have heard stories of a lot of cultivators in a lot of states that have done a lot of silly and crazy and illegal things to get that first batch set up, that first round, flying it in on private planes, and like, you know, and just a whole manner of things that, just because of the way things were worded and set up, they almost made it next to impossible to do it the right way. What this does is the DEA has come out and they have stated, listen, all seeds, no matter what, anything that we are classifying as illegal has to have 0.3% THC in it. If it doesn't, if you can't measure it and it has more than the 3%, 0.3, then it is not deemed as anything illegal. It is deemed as legal hemp. So what that means is now I can transfer any seed from state to state in any capacity, even if it is ever tested. I can never, ever, ever have it classified as something illegal. It is going to be under 0.3% in that stage, in the seed stage. And so I am thinking about the impact of what this would have industry-wide on new states that are just starting out, Ohio cultivators that are trying to get new strains in to develop a better system for their patients and stuff, and home grow opportunities now, and what that means for their market, and the price per seed value, which could be $15 or $50 a seed. What the implications of this and what it actually means for the economy of cannabis, I really think is much larger than what anybody is giving credit to.
Wow. You know, when you describe it that way, as passionate as you always do, Dustin, you are 100% correct, right? That is, I've heard the stories. I've heard some stories as well about some of the first batches, and I was starting to laugh as you were describing that, because I love that weird little loophole that states say, yeah, we're going to be legal, but you can't bring in illegal stuff to start. It's like, well, how am I supposed to get started, bro? Like, what am I supposed to do? So that always made me laugh. But the sale and the transportation, because the whole issue is you can't state to state export 0.3% THC, right? And essentially what they're doing is doing the same thing that Delta 8 and other manufacturers are, finding that loophole, except this one is approved by the people, right? This one's approved by the man, so to speak. The DEA and the FDA have stepped in and said, yes. I mean, they've given the stamp. So now you can take those seeds and move them from place to place. Like that's going to be monumental. It's a loophole, right? It's a loophole that was exploited, but it's going to be monumental going forward, the ability to do that. That is incredible. Wow. I think that's going to be change as these other states. And really, what's going to see the biggest benefit is the states that are getting started. Like you said, some of these newer states that are just getting started up and stuff, they're the ones who are going to take the biggest hit from those things. So that'll be really interesting to see what happens with them in the future. Man, that's good stuff. I got to tell you, Dustin, I love these shows where we just get together and chat. Like, we don't do this enough sometimes. We have a lot of guests. And as I said, a ton of great guests we have lined up on Because Cannabis in the near future. Make sure Wayward Media, check us out, wayward.media. The website's always being updated. More great updates coming soon. So check out wayward.media. Subscribe to the show. I hope you have. Hope you hit subscribe down below. If you're listening to us on audio where we are available, make sure you give us a follow as well. Leave a comment, right? What do you want to see? We got a lot of news and note shows. We got a lot of guests. Do you have a guest? Do you have someone that you would love to hear or have sit down and join us for a conversation? Let us know in the comments below. We would like to have that as well. We got the new studio working on, Dustin. We got the new intro music coming soon. Like, we got some changes coming in here. I like where we're headed. But for now, our hour is up, Dustin. So thank you, as always, man. Hanging out on a Friday afternoon, talking cannabis. Of course, who doesn't want to do that? Have a pleasant week, Dustin. We'll see you again next week. Everyone out there, you as well, have a pleasant week. Go have a good time. Go celebrate. Go do something awesome. Take care, everybody.